and welcome to the Art of Decluttering podcast, your residential weekly podcast on all things decluttering and organising. I emphasise the weekly because last week when we talked about breathing space and what it means to have breathing space in your home and in your world, I asked the question, do you guys want breathing space from the podcast? Do you feel like weekly is too much? Do you feel like I'm constantly giving you new episodes and you can't catch up? Oh my goodness, you guys are the best. Legitimately, you've all made my week. The messages that I got this week were just people sharing their story of where they listen to the podcast, why they listen to the podcast, how they listen to the podcast. And every single person that messaged was like, please keep it weekly. So I'm going to keep it weekly because I really just wanted to make sure I wasn't overwhelming you all. But I want to say thank you to a few people. I know this is not going to be a comprehensive list, but I got that many emails and DMs. So this is just the list that I have been keeping note of. Thank you to Sarah from England, Jen from Michigan, Fiona from Melbourne, Amanda from Palm Cove in Queensland, Elizabeth from Switzerland, Julie, Amanda, Pip, Chantel, Annette and Kirsty all DM'd me. Thank you so much, because it really, sometimes when you're a podcaster, you kind of don't know. I know what my download numbers are. I know that most of you listen to nearly every episode, but I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. So I'm super stoked. You've put a bit of a pep in my podcasting step. And so we're going to keep things weekly. What I thought is if I need to take a break, if we're going on family holidays and I haven't had opportunity to get ahead, what I'll do is I'll pick a really popular episode or a favorite episode and do a replay episode. But other than that, let's just keep up. I'm obviously keeping ahead on the podcast. Thrilled, beyond thrilled that you guys want me to keep doing weekly episodes. I feel like if I had to go fortnightly or something, I would kind of break my streak. I kind of get... You know how people talk about they've got like a snap streak, or I don't even know what it's called. I'm probably like the oldest person in the world trying to know the words, but they've been snapping each other and they've got this streak and it's however many days. I feel like I've been doing that, but in a podcasting land, and it's 7 years of every single week without missing a week. And I feel like if I break it, I don't know, there's something just about continuing that on. So all that to say thank you. If this is your first episode, I know that there are actually going to be a lot of you tuning in for the first time because I had the privilege and joy of being a guest on Minimal Mums podcast last week. That's Dawn. She did an episode for me a few weeks ago. So if you scroll back there, you'll be able to find her episode. But I've also had a lot of new listeners come, a lot of you from the States, so welcome to my sisters and brothers from the US. I hope that this is a podcast that you fall in love with, that you love catching up with weekly, and obviously there's a back catalogue of 430 episodes. You can kind of find ones that work for you. I got a message from one lady this week saying she'd found me via the Minimal Mum, was so stoked and had started listening through different episodes, and she said, I absolutely loved your 101 series, which obviously was a foundational series that we did at the start of this year around how to declutter particular and specific rooms in your home. And she also loved the ADHD series. I was running a workshop last night and so many people had questions around ADHD and decluttering and organising. So if that's something that is relevant to you or someone that you love, just scroll back in the feed and you'll see there's quite a few episodes around ADHD. I share my own story around that, interview psychologists, OTs, ADHD coaches, people living with ADHD. So it's a really interesting series if you want to go back to that. So what we're starting today is a 3-week series called What's Your Problem? Because I find sometimes that people misdiagnose their clutter problem, or something just doesn't feel right in this house, or this is not quite right, this is not working. They look at their house and go, ugh, I don't like living here, but they can't adequately diagnose what the problem is. And if you don't know what the problem is, you don't know what the solution is, because they have to match. And what I was thinking about and been ruminating on for a little while now is what's the base problem so that we can create a base solution? And then once I discovered what they were, I was like, oh my goodness, people mismatch the problem and the solution all the time. So what I want to explain to you quickly now is what the 3 problems I've identified are. These are the core problems at the base of your clutter and disorganization problem. And then there are 3 simple answers. And what I love about it is without even planning it, it fits directly into the way that we work with clients. And then today I want to go through problem number 1 and therefore solution number 1 as well. So I think when it comes to clutter and kind of going like, what is the problem here? I think there are 3 problems. I think there's a quantity problem, a systems problem, and a habit problem. And they can all coexist at the same time. And sometimes one might be a little bit more predominant or one might be weightier than the others. But the solution for each of those problems is actually different. And when you can really kind of look at the solution and go, oh, that's specifically what needs to be done, you can then solve the problem. These problems are solvable problems. So if you've got a quantity problem, the solution is to declutter. If you've got a systems problem, the solution is to organize. And if you've got a habit problem, the system is all about maintaining, like what can you do to maintain it? And so we're going to go into that over the course of 3 weeks and dig into that a little bit. And I want this to be a resource you can listen to and use as a diagnostic tool for your own clutter problem. So we're going to dive into the first what's your problem and talk about quantity. So let's go to a super quick break and come back and understand what a quantity problem is and what are the tools to solve it. So when it comes to trying to identify what is the problem in my house, my first go-to is to have the underlying assumption we're probably dealing with a quantity problem. It's almost always the first problem that needs to be uncovered. You think of problems almost like an onion. So the outer layer is this quantity problem, and then we have a systems problem, and then we have a maintenance problem. And so the outer layer, we kind of need to get through that to get to the deeper things. So you'll discover other problems like these other ones as you go, but quantity is usually that first domino that you need to knock over so that you can start to get freedom from clutter. So a quantity problem is you just have too much stuff. And I want you to remember as well that quantity isn't about a fixed metric. Like it's not like there's some magical number of dinner plates or coffee mugs or leggings that you can have. And after that particular number, you have a quantity problem. The quantity that is that kind of tipping point of what do I need, use and love versus what becomes a clutter problem is completely relative. It's relative to the size of your family. It's relative to the size of your home, the capacity of your storage, the reality of your circumstances. And so you've really got to kind of investigate, okay, how has this become about? I have a quantity problem. How do I know what the right quantity is? So the solution, I think, is rather than trying to create this solution of, okay, I'm going to have the right amount I'm going to have the right quantity in the house, it's very hard to just do that on paper. My suggestion is that the solution is to declutter. So reduce the quantity of items in your home and you will get to an equilibrium where you go, actually, this feels good. I feel comfortable in the home. I've got homes for everything. It can be put away. I'm solving that systems and solutions problem at the next layer of that onion. And so you want to declutter when you have a quantity problem. If you're not sure what your problem is, if you try and listen to these episodes and go, oh, but I don't know what my problem is, trust me, just assume that it's a quantity problem. And it doesn't need to be like your whole house. You might go, oh, my bedroom feels really small and it's really annoying and I feel crap in here and da-da-da-da-da. Assume it's a quantity problem. Okay. Is there furniture you can remove? Do you have a bedside table and an armchair and a desk and a standing wardrobe and somewhere else that you can hang clothes that overflow? What can you get rid of? Like you've got a quantity problem. And quantity can be in the minutiae. So it can be, I've got too many shoes, and the quantity can be in the furniture and storage. I've got too many items of furniture in here. And so decluttering, I feel like, it's not like I'm trying to convince you all that you just need to declutter, but you're listening to this podcast because you value decluttering and probably you're identifying like there's some kind of a problem that you have that you want to solve. So if it's a quantity problem, the solution is to declutter. And so the easiest way to declutter is to think what's rubbish and what can be donated. In many of my episodes, I've talked about the 5 R's that we use when working with clients in all our courses. You've got rubbish, which is items that, are going to landfill or recycling or just composting. You've got rehome, which is items that belong in a different space in the home. Return, items that belong to somebody else or need to be returned to the shops. Repurpose, so they're the items that still have life left in them. They're just not going to live that out in your house. And so repurposing things is your donations. And then you've got the category of remain, of the items that you're keeping. So when it comes to decluttering, you're focusing on rubbish and repurpose. What can go and what can be donated. So let me give you an example of what this might look like when you're trying to understand what your problem is, but you're misdiagnosing it. And I'm using this one because this is the one I see probably the most regularly. I see this in the kitchen and I see this in toy rooms. So we're going to talk about a toy room or a playroom or even just the space that the kids keep their toys. Parents feel like, oh my goodness, that playroom is not working. It's always cluttered. The toys are always everywhere. I can never keep it organized. And in order to keep it organized, it takes me such a long time every night after the kids go to bed. It's causing family conflict. And so one of the first things people do is go out and buy new storage options, which would be great if the problem was a systems problem, right? So we're going to talk more about that next week. But you may now have a systems problem. Or the other option is parents start nagging their kids. They should be keeping the room tidier. We complain that the kids are lazy or they're entitled or they're just not keeping their stuff. But that is actually a maintenance problem. And at this stage, maybe you don't have a habits problem because it's actually, there's so much stuff, you cannot create habits around that. But you actually have a quantity problem. So sometimes we go to the other ones because we think they're easier to solve. So we think, we'll just get more storage solutions. We'll buy more containers. We'll buy more sets of drawers. We'll buy more tubs and we'll try and solve it that way. Or we'll nag the kids and just spend hours and hours tidying up all the time. But the diagnosis is you actually have a quantity problem. Nobody could keep that playroom tidy if they tried because there's way too much stuff. Maybe there's too many categories, too many toys, just too much things, too many items, too much inventory. You have a quantity problem. And the only way to deal with a quantity problem is through decluttering. And so when you tackle any space and you're like, I don't know what's wrong with this space. Why isn't it working? Assume I have a quantity problem. And so then deal with the quantity problem. What can you get rid of? So you might choose to scroll back and find an episode that is the specific place that you're dealing with. It might be the pantry, might be the laundry or your clothes or the garage, might be sporting equipment, or it might be paperwork. Whatever the quantity issue is, deal with it. Get rid of stuff. Be ruthless. Get rid of what you can. Think really creatively about, like, do I actually need to keep this thing? Is there another solution that I have? Because once you start doing that, you reduce, and you're never going to completely remove a quantity problem at the start. It's not going to be like first go over, you're going to nail it. It's something that often needs refining. Even now, when I'm 10 years into this journey of minimalism and living with less, there's still areas in my home where I'm like, okay, I could reduce the quantity on that. So don't be harsh on yourself. Don't expect you're going to get it perfect first go. But start with the decluttering. Start with donating things and getting rid of rubbish. If you just focus on those 2 areas and are really intentional, and when you're tempted to give up and just go buy more containers or nag someone to tidy up after themselves, I think I have a quantity problem. And if you've tried a whole lot of solutions, and this is, parents, I'm speaking to you, if you constantly feel like this is an ongoing issue and I don't understand why my kids just can't tidy up and how does the house always look like a bomb went off, I lovingly tell you have a quantity issue. If there's enough stuff in your house that it can be made to look like a bomb went off in a matter of hours, you have a quantity issue. And the awesome news, like there's so much hope. The awesome news is the solution is just decluttering. It's just getting rid of the stuff that you're not using. You're actually going to make your life simpler by keeping the stuff that you love and use and need and getting rid of all the rest. I could go so much more into the decluttering side of it, but the reality is there's 430 episodes that are so much more specific to targeted decluttering, and I want you to go and find those. But for today, what's your problem? It's a quantity problem. And what's the solution to a quantity problem? Decluttering. All right. So next week, we're going to talk about what to do when it's a systems problem, because the solution to a systems problem is organizing. And I'm going to teach you and talk to you through the different components of that so that you can make it work for you and not feel like you're just having to go and containerize everything in your house. I hope that's been helpful. Again, thank you so much for joining me each week. Welcome to all our newbies. If you're wanting to find out more about the art of decluttering, it's not just a podcast. I've got a whole business and the podcast is just a part of that. But I've got an amazing team all throughout Melbourne and Gippsland. We go all the way from Werribee to Seymour to Warragul to the Mornington Peninsula and service clients in their home. We do have capacity for new clients. We've got some amazing team members that have been doing all their training and are ready to go. So whether you're a private client or an NDIS client or you're supporting someone maybe through an aged care plan, whoever you are, if you need some help with your quantity problem, can I just put our hand up? We would absolutely love to help you. It's one of our favorite things to do. So just reach out. You can find out more about the art of decluttering. You can just Google the art of decluttering and you'll find us, or theartofdecluttering.com.au, and you can read all about our lovely business. There's courses. You can buy my book. Oh my gosh, so many of you have bought my book lately. I think I've been posting 2 to 3 books a day, getting those out all over the world, sending them to places I had to look how to spell. So that has been super fun. So until next week, enjoy the freedom. I would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people who are the traditional custodians of the land this podcast is recorded on. I would also like to pay respects to their elders, both past and present, of the Kulin Nation, and extend that respect to other Indigenous Australians. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed today's episode, I would love you to rate and review the show on your podcast app. That will help others to find the Art of Decluttering podcast as well. If you'd like any more information, you can visit theartofdecluttering.com.au, and I would love to see you in my Facebook group. Just search the Art of Decluttering community on Facebook and join today. I hope that you have an incredible rest of your day and enjoy the freedom.